I want to talk about Egypt because Egypt has opened the Rafah crossing with Gaza to let through around 100 dual national Palestinians along with dozens of injured. It follows a deal that was brokered by Qatar. Egypt has strongly resisted calls to accept refugees from Gaza onto its territory, even temporarily. Well, to talk more about that, we're joined now by Dr. Marwa Maziad. She's with us now. Marwa, thank you very much indeed for being with us. Marwa, does this represent a change in policy by the Egyptians?
Not at all. It's the continuation of the exact policy of saying aid into Gaza. Only the foreign nationals like the U.S., American Palestinians out after the aid gets in for the past 3 weeks. That has been the policy. Blinken wrote an op-ed today in the Washington Post saying aid into Gaza, repeating it like 3-4 times throughout. And this is the exchange. The dual nationals only, not the Palestinians, not the exodus of millions onto Sinai as some were circulating and perpetuating that. Only the nationals of foreign passports, and also we're talking a few hundreds, out after trucks and trucks and trucks should get into Gaza so that these kind of allegations of almost war crimes that Israel finding itself in would actually be alleviated. So no change of policy, exactness of the policy, only taking 3 weeks in delay, but somehow the United States and the Egyptians have an understanding, and Israel seems to be complying right now.
And Marwa, why is there so much resistance inside Egypt to allowing, women, children, injured people, the elderly into Sinai, even temporarily, as Israel works to destroy Hamas? I mean, we've seen Jordan, Lebanon, and Turkey erect huge camps for refugees fleeing the fighting in Syria. Why the opposition, the resistance to Palestinian refugees?
Okay, let's explain. No such thing as Palestinian refugees anymore after the legacies and trauma of Nakba and all of that. Egypt's not going to be part of that, won't happen. Also, this twisted kind of analogy with the Syrians who were sent to Turkey in some demographic engineering almost. Basically, Turkey was interested in having those Sunni Turks giving some nationality to them in order to engineer some demographics in its own southeast region against the Kurds and using them for elections and stuff. This nonsense Egypt's not involved in at all. Also, the Iranians were
people fled Aleppo and other cities because of the carpet bombing campaigns by the Syrians and the Russians. They had nowhere else to go. I mean, Jordan offered them a lifeline.
So, but there were interests of these countries who were even absorbing those for their own interests. So there were almost human trafficking in all these refugees. Egypt is not interested in any of that, is not interested in depriving the Palestinians of their land, of their place, and not interested also in turning Sinai, which it fought Israel, and then had peace with Israel in order to have sovereignty, borders, these things matter to Egypt, and then suddenly it's going to be some refugee camp for the Israelis in order to get rid of the Palestinians. That nonsense that was circulating, and it's kind of like balloon testing, is flying completely against the will of Egypt and the Egyptians. So even if the leadership, if Sisi kind of muse and maneuvers in order to give the impression that he can even entertain any of that, he's very sure that the Egyptians are not accepting this, and that would further destabilize the relations between Egypt and Israel. And it's not in the best interest at all that more Egyptians now, very modern, moderate, somewhat very normalizing of Israel and Israelis, would have this sentiment that this is nonsense, almost a garbage suggestion. So I would say Israel should not even continue to test with this idea at all. Think of other things. Egypt can be very helpful in other matters.
Well, I don't think it's just Israel pushing for it. I think the Americans have asked Cairo as well.
It will fall flat.
Egypt is a big recipient of American aid. Is that not a consideration at all?
Of course, the aid is nonsense, and no amount of 1 billion. Are you kidding me? This is a joke. So no amount of pressure will lead to a geopolitical decision by the Egyptian president or the Egyptian leadership or the Egyptian people against their will of something that they don't like. So this is kind of a closed. I think it was good that they test that. It's circulating. but you now get the reaction,
well,
the response.
it's kind of it's natural, isn't it, that there are 3 borders that Gaza has. 2 of them go to Israel. There's no way Israel is going. Can I finish? Israel is not going to let any Palestinians from Gaza into their territory. Egypt is the only country that controls the other border.
No, there is a Mediterranean corridor, and that's why you see some Cyprus offering to, or even the French offering some, on a marine type, like a ship for help with hospitals. And by the way, if we're talking about injured people who can be treated in an Arish hospital or having some hospital, that is doable. That is something Egypt can do.
Well, Israel treated wounded Syrians in its hospital. Well, Israel and Syria are enemy states, aren't they?
So we're not talking about the wounded. The wounded can be treated in Al Arish, but tent cities and exodus of millions, that kind of it's almost a joke. I don't know how to describe it.
All right, Danny Ayalon is with me. Mara, if you don't mind, Danny Ayalon is with me in the studio, former Israeli ambassador to the US. You wanted to come.
Yes, hi,
and
Doctor.
You had a terrible interview propagating that. So
yes, I'll tell you why. Because Egypt and Israel has a great peace agreement which worked very well for both countries. Let me also remind you.
100%.
You know that also Israel, contrary to the Camp David protocol. Security protocol allowed Egyptian military to come into the Sinai to fight. Who did they fight? ISIS, Hamas. The same thing goes now when Hamas is also threatening through also the Ikhwan.
Egypt did not push its population onto Israel while it's kind of like to prepare of that without that solution. So I'm actually with you. So we agree. Egypt and Israel have a treaty that stood the time 40 years and counting because the interests of both countries are met.
Exactly.
Israel has its security from Egypt as a foe or an enemy, none of that. And Egypt has its Sinai back, which was the whole fight, right? And that's lasting 40 years and counting, and it's going to be more. So don't trigger that by things that really are too much of a red line. Now, even in the example you said, who was Egypt fighting at the time? Yeah, Ansar Beit al-Maqdis, ISIS affiliates, all those groups that were directing their arms against Egypt. But that situation did not include any displacement of Egyptian refugees. In fact, Egypt is clear that it didn't export any of its problems in terms of like refugees, people crossing to Europe, even with the uprisings and a decade of instability. So this is a very sensitive issue to start thinking that, while I'm taking care of Hamas, take those Palestinians either temporary or permanently or whatever. That is non-negotiable. Now you think about other situations and act accordingly.
I have a question, not political question. If one Palestinian child will be saved by crossing the Rafah border into the Sinai and getting medical treatment, you still would not allow him to go in?
No, that is a Palestinian child will be saved when we have the humanitarian corridors into Gaza, repeated 3 times by Blinken in his latest article and counting. You get the aid to them. You already push them down.
What about the risk that Hamas is stealing the aid, Marwa?
No, that can be controlled. Sealing the aid, Egypt is very adamant about no arms getting through these trucks. There's so many measures of, even from the Israeli side, it can look at through all of that for security. And of course, it wouldn't be diverged. Are you distrusting all those humanitarian workers, UN workers, mechanisms of?
No, we're talking about once the aid is inside Gaza, that Hamas might steal the aid and it won't get to the civilians. Okay.
No, there are UN workers and networks. Control that. Work closely with those individuals. Work closely with the UN so that none of that reaches anyone else. Make sure it reaches this child. Be the good image. Israel has lost so much over the past 3 weeks. I lost an Israeli friend in the kibbutzim, a dear friend from the University of Washington.
We're sorry. We're very sorry.
Very sorry about that.
I'm sorry.
I could not breathe for more than 3-4 years, days. And then I start seeing the images in Gaza, and the same empathy I have for my Israeli Jewish friend automatically it was transferred to also the Gazans, even though I don't know many or any of them. So,
Marwa, can I ask?
Israel is in a position now that it has. If you're talking about this child and being saved, Israel should be that image now.
All right.
It's about time.
All right, Marwa, thank you, Marwa. I want to ask you something else. I mean, do you think that the Egyptian leadership want Israel to completely destroy Hamas?
Good question.
Right now, honestly, there are some doubts even about that.
Why?
Maybe a year or two or whatever ago, it was clear. There was some alliance, Egypt, the Gulf countries, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Israel, and I even wrote about that. And there was the Turkey-Qatar bloc and, pan-Islamism. But with what's going on and reshuffling some of the, that everything's up, in the air right now. So I'm not 100% sure.
You think
I'm not 100% sure that the Egyptians, who are, as I say, very moderate Egyptians, pro-peace, Sadati kind of people, would look at this and say that Israel is doing the right thing, completely, even destroying destroying Hamas in this way. Maybe the future that will secure Egypt is something very similar to the Egypt-Israel. The future that will secure Israel is something similar to the peace treaty with Egypt, where you have an actual state that is as armed and capable, but it doesn't use its arms against you because there is peace and a treaty. Maybe now Israel needs an actual Palestinian state with formal armed forces that would be under the control of a political leadership that has peace with Israel. Like any other state, any other country. But having, first of all, terrorist groups that change into militants and then militias and all these competing orders of violence. You suffered from that in Lebanon with the Hezbollah, suffered from that among the Palestinian polity with Hamas. Maybe it's actually time to crave a Palestinian state with an army, even armed forces. I'm not saying an army. So in a sense, armed, but it is so much in peace with you that it doesn't need to do any of that, which is the situation of Egypt. This is the model.
Dr. Marziad, one more question maybe, which is consistent with what you say about the Palestinian state. But Egypt for decades controlled the Gaza Strip. Until 1967, actually, it was all Egyptian. Why didn't Egypt build a Palestinian state then?
At the time, between 47 and 67?
Yeah. 20 years,
Because if you're going to tell me what was wrong with the partition, Arabs should have accepted the partition to begin with, right? But to think, why didn't they build a state there? So basically Gaza on its own and the West Bank on its own, because back in the time, okay, I'll be honest with you, they were thinking, they will have the entirety of Israel, Palestine.
Yeah,
so
I also...
Marwa,
let's acceptance. But I am now for, by the way, my suggested proposition for a Palestinian state is a Palestinian state exclusively in Gaza, with Gaza City as its capital. I'm not even discussing the West Bank. I'm thinking a Palestinian state in Gaza with Gaza City as its capital, and this is your state. Anyone living in the West Bank is a permanent resident of Israel and can have a Palestinian passport with this new Palestinian state. But it's governed by the Palestinians, and it's governed by not by Egypt, not by an Arab entity of some sort.
Will Egypt have a role in any governance of a post-Hamas Gaza, in some kind of international coalition, advisory, supervisory, that kind of thing? Do you see a role for Egypt?
What I'm suggesting is, of course, there could be interim anything, but this is aiding the Palestinians to become a state so that we can get over this. They have their state. It's there. They have a passport. They have an airport. They have a port. They are collaborating with other Arabs and non-Arabs, and Cyprus up there and Greece over there and Israel next door. Okay? And that's a state recognized so that we don't have the hassle of every time, why are they an occupied country? Why didn't they ever get this
It will just have to be. It will just have to be demilitarized, so they cannot threaten Egypt or Israel and Iran. You know, Iran has built
I'm going to
Hamas.
suggest something I'm suggesting now something very provocative, and think about it. I'd even think if it is the kind of militarized, meaning small armed forces, but it is not this militia. It's not this terrorists. It's not that, but it's an armed forces, formal, you know, with the whole 9 yards of, like, you know, formality and regalia or whatever. But it has civilian control over it, and that civilian government is a pro-peace, pro-integration, pro-whatever, right? And then the people would feel secure enough that they have their own armed forces. By the way, they already have Hamas. So in a sense, this is in practice existing, except that it doesn't dress the way it should be dressed. It doesn't look the way it should look. And it
do you think the Palestinians can produce that kind of political leadership? Because they have said no to every offer of peace over the decades.
I think, you know what, Laura, this is a great question. And I think it's almost as if, you know, it's almost an excuse. We keep saying that so that we don't get to the point of having the state because we really don't want to have that. And we thought it's not important. Maybe we have to re-examine what you just said, and help them get there. Make it happen. Instead of saying, you know, we haven't found anyone, because we say that so that we don't have the state. I don't know why exactly, but we're relegating them. They are just Arabs. They're not Palestinian. And also this idea of, like, it's either or. Either the Palestinians take everything and there's no Israel, or Israel somehow learn to say, I want to take everything instead so that I'm not taken by. So it's kind of like, I'm going to eat you for lunch before you have me for dinner. But if we bypass all of this and it becomes kind of like having a state, and I'm saying even in Gaza only, this is the Palestinian state, and it goes back to the Philistines of ancient people of the sea and whatever. It's a Mediterranean city. A city.
It could be a beautiful state. It would geographically, and where it is in a very strategic location. And I'm sure there is a lot of willingness to help the people of Gaza rebuild their state in the Arab world. But do you think it's not just Israel, Marwa? The Arab countries are also guilty of ignoring the Palestinians.
Everybody will help, but that starts with the non-circulation anymore of this idea of an exodus of the Palestinians over there, so that there are no Palestinians anymore, and somehow Gaza became a security zone that is, protecting Israel, and then all these Palestinians are around the border there. If you get to that, you already lost the Egyptians.
Well, are you hearing that from people in Egypt? Is that what they want? They want to see a thriving Gaza. They're willing to help. They're willing to, be part of a coalition.
But they want the Palestinians in Gaza.
Yeah,
They don't want any suggestion of the Palestinians temporarily or permanently out of Gaza and into their country, because for the reasons I enumerated. No, they don't want to liquidate this Palestinian issue. In fact, they want them to have their state. And also they don't want Sinai to become anybody's anything. Suggest anybody. Say Cyprus will have some refugees in Sinai because whatever. It's not just about the Palestinians. No, the answer is no. Sovereignty, this is my country. No. Okay? It's a sensitive piece of land.
Yeah. Mara, I think you've made your point. I think you absolutely made your point very strongly.
Danny, are you on board with that?
I can't speak for Danny, but
Danny gave me the thumbs up. I think we can have a...
Danny, do you appreciate Mara's concerns with the historical connotations for Palestinians being displaced? Egypt does not want to be party to that, of seeing Palestinians displaced from the land.
I can agree with everything, provided one thing. Yes, first of all, Israel doesn't want to control Gaza. Egypt doesn't want to control Gaza. Nobody wants to control Gaza. But in order for Gaza not to come out in terror against Israel or Egypt, by the way, Hamas was also against Egypt. We need to have a demilitarized Gaza with, I would say, an interim period to rebuild a society, a civil society in Gaza. If this is the case, then of course Gaza can be the Palestinian state. I agree, and Gaza will be the capital of the Palestinian state. Absolutely.
The Singapore of the
but it has to right. So you see, we agree.
So much future to be had.
So much potential, absolutely, and I think we've seen a willingness from the Gulf Arab states and from Egypt and from the United States as well to kind of see things differently in Gaza and work towards a different future for Gaza. So let's all hope for that. Dr. Marwa Maziad at the Middle East Institute, thank you very much indeed. Great to have you with us. Thank you, Marwa. Danny, you're going to stay with us for a bit more.
Yeah, by the way, I think it's a great idea, but what she did was she gave up in the entire Judea and Samaria. It's no Palestinian.
All right, let's take one thing at a time. We're going to take a short break. Stay with us. We'll be back with more for you right after this. Don't go away.